Welcome to Move the Sticks. I am Bucky Brooks, and that is my partner, my man, LZ, Lance Zierlein, going on. What's happening, Lance?
Not too much. Just ready to get into it. It's the off season for the NFL, but what we're finding out is there is never an off season.
No, there's never an off season.
Slightly slower season. That's all.
Yeah, slightly slower. I think because this week coincided with the start of OTA, so we have people on the field. We saw helmets and people running around, throwing it all over the yard. We saw Pat Mahomes back on the field a little bit, tossing it around, participating in workouts. I got to ask you, Lance, because we had that conversation. Let me say this. The feedback from that conversation that we had on Pat Mahomes and revisionist history was outstanding on Twitter, so I appreciate the people weighing in. But Pat Mahomes being back so quickly, I think you know his trainer, Bobby Droop, or are you just familiar with Bobby?
I'm familiar with him. Yeah, I don't know him personally.
Look, I got to say it's remarkable the dude is on the field and participating. What are your thoughts initially?
Not surprised. I mean, it's earlier than even I anticipate. I didn't anticipate him missing any time. The idea he'd have to start on a PUP list for me with an ACL, knowing how Pat Mahomes gets after it, I never thought for 1 second he was going to miss a single game. With that said, I thought he'd be ready, by camp. We're talking about OTAs. We're in May. That's crazy. We got vets who don't show up for OTAs.
Yeah.
And Pat Mahomes is back from a knee. I mean, it speaks to three things. It speaks to the people Pat has around him, including the medical staff. It speaks to Pat Mahomes' desire and football character, certainly, which has never been in question. And it also speaks to the modern technology when it comes to medicine and surgical processes. It's just amazing the comebacks that people make. And it used to be 1 year, Bucky, with ACLs. Then they changed it to like maybe 9 to 12 months. And that continues to shrink. The window's shrinking more and more and more with ACL return. So I just, the medical side, I think, needs to be acknowledged as well, that we keep getting, I'm not doing anything, but the medical industry keeps getting better and better and better in terms of the surgical process. And of course, I would assume the technology that goes into it.
Yeah, it's crazy to think about like how advanced it was. Lance, it used to be not only that it was to take a year to recover, but it would take an additional year before we anticipated that player being back to the level that he left at, meaning that it was almost like a 2-year injury, a year to return. He'll come back and play, but he's not going to be the same. But then the following year, we see him more like the way that he had played prior to the injury. But now with the advancements of, you talk about technology, the way people really get after their rehab, we are seeing some of these miraculous bounce backs. And maybe it's something in the water in Texas, because Adrian Peterson was remarkable in his return from an ACL injury.
That was crazy. The level that he came back at was crazy.
Yeah, he was like, I popped my knee, but I'm back and I'm even better. And then to think about Pat Mahomes potentially doing that, I don't know, like they always say don't mess with Texas, but I may give, you Texans, y'all like to poke out your chest a little bit, like it's a little different down there than other parts, but it certainly appears to be different when it comes to their ability to bounce back from injury. Now, someone else who has some injuries early in his career who has bounced back in a major way, Derwin James. Derwin James just got a 3-year, $75.6 million extension, makes him the highest paid safety in ball. I'm going to say this. That's a bit of a misnomer in terms of pegging him as a safety based on how they move him around. But, man, people breaking the bank. They are breaking the bank for these safeties and playmakers right now.
Big time. And it's funny because it's a certain type of safety, right? It's Derwin was one of the first ones that we talked about. When did Derwin come in? 18? I think he was the 18 draft. When he was drafted, I remember, doing the draft coverage with you and Money Smith at the time. And we were talking about him. Number one, we thought he fell a little further than kind of the hype surrounding him. Thought he was going a little bit earlier. But that was on the heels of Jamal Adams was still a big name at that time. And Jamal as a hybrid really didn't have the impact that all of us expected him to have, but Derwin James has. And it used to be, okay, well, he's more of a box safety. How do you, the idea of what a safety is now and what makes a valuable safety continues to evolve based on the evolution of offense. And offense evolves based on the evolution of defense. It's kind of an interesting yin and yang, or it's an interesting symbiotic relationship, because these two sides will counterpunch based on what the other side does. And it's a never ending, okay, now we're in 12 and 13 personnel. Well,
Yeah.
good, because now we've got Kyle Hamilton, who is a multifaceted safety, but certainly able to come up and lay the lumber. Derwin James, hitter, physical. You just saw Caleb Downs, hitter, physical.
Yeah.
That's never changed. Like, it used to be those physical hitting types. That's great, but they're a little bit more limited. That's not how they're looked at now if you have a plus athletic profile with it.
Yeah, so what's interesting, and I'm writing about this for the notebook this week. My teammate, Hall of Famer LeRoy Butler, some would credit him as being the first guy that was the star in a defense, meaning the position that has been popularized at the collegiate level is a guy that is like slot corner, slot safety, whatever you want to deem him, but he's that fifth DB that's on the field. Gary Patterson famously used the 4-2-5 at TCU, at Texas Christian, with outstanding success, and kind of changed the way that defensive coordinators at multiple levels thought about defense and having that fifth guy on the field. And that fifth guy for him was a bit of a safety, linebacker, corner type that could play. Well, back in the mid 90s, when I was playing for the Green Bay Packers in the middle of a terrific stretch, LeRoy Butler was that player for the late Fitz Sherman. And what Fitz did is he put LeRoy down near the line of scrimmage in the box. He used him as an unconventional nickelback, meaning he would blitz him off the edge, he would play tight ends, he would float in zones and do a bunch of different things. And LeRoy was one of the few that had 20 sacks and 20 interceptions. Like, that is remarkable production for a DB to make those plays. He goes on and is a 4-time All-Pro. We see him now with a gold jacket, but playing there and playing in that secondary, watching LeRoy do all the things, I was like, man, that is a very unique deployment for a safety in that spot, because we're so used to talking about the undersized cornerback being the nickel guy. Where now the league is saying, nah, we're taking safeties, we're putting them in the box, and we're using them in a variety of ways to blitz, to stop the run, to cover slot receivers, to handle tight ends. And so that guy almost has to be a bit of a decathlete. We fast forward now, we're talking about Derwin James. When Derwin James was coming out, and I knew Derwin from high school because he played on at the opening, one of the Nike events. He was on my team, and I got a chance to watch this dude play wide out, play DB, bounce around, or whatever. To now see how he is, because I'm gonna read you these alignment numbers from PFF. Okay, so we're gonna talk about him being a safety because that's what they said. Hey, he's the highest paid safety. But I'm gonna read off these numbers: 261 snaps at inside linebacker, 132 snaps at outside linebacker, 48 snaps at strong safety, 128 snaps at free safety. But you know where he lined up the most? 369 snaps at slot corner. So when we talk about this position and we talk about safeties and positional value, and the word on Caleb Downs, we can't take a safety that high. I hear us say that in the draft, but then a few weeks later, Derwin James is getting a load of money to play a prime position where he's commanding $25 million annually, being a do-it-all playmaker in the defensive back.
You know, when you think about safeties, there was a time, and there has been a time, where tight ends, safeties, obviously inside linebackers, there's a devaluing of that position, running back. But when you have a really good safety, that's a force multiplier on a defense. I mean, you can go all the way back to Joey Browner, which he was this big hammer back in the day. Shout out RIP to Joey Browner. Bob Sanders, great, just a bullet. And he was smaller than most safeties, but huge difference maker. Troy Polamalu, who the Steelers moved up for, huge difference makers. You talked about LeRoy Butler. Kyle Hamilton is multifaceted. They're not all the same types of safeties necessarily, although I do see a lot of similar traits. Number one, they all have alpha personalities, whether it's in the locker room or on the field. There's an alpha element to the way that they play the game, a great deal of physicality or a great deal of aggressiveness. Number two is, even if they're not terrifically multifaceted, with which most of these guys are. Bob Sanders was an enforcer who also ran in a 4.3s, which was rare is still rare for a safety. There is a certain level of physicality to each one of these safeties that I'm talking about. It's not just taking the ball away. It's they can come downhill and add as an add-on run defender if need be. But a lot of the guys like Kyle Hamilton, like Derwin James, like Troy Polamalu, have the ability to move around pre and post snap that allows defensive coordinators to change the pictures for quarterbacks and make it more difficult. And they can match up on a variety of different types of players as well. It may not be you may not want Derwin on, a slot receiver long term for a ton of snaps and over long executed routes, but they can do it in a certain modicum of time, which makes them that much more valuable.
Yeah, man, I think it just changes everything. A lot of times we always talk about the trickle down effect from the pros to college, but I think it's really the trickle up. What we're seeing at the college game is now
Yeah.
filtering in to what we're doing in the pros. Think about the 3 high safety looks that John Heacock was doing at Iowa State, and how that has kind of become a mix where people are using 3 safeties and deploying them differently. You look at the utilization of Nick Emmanuel. You talked about Kyle Hamilton and Derwin James. In H-Town, Jalen Petrie, who would drop down and make it happen, and isn't afraid of the smoke at all. So if you don't have one of those guys, it's really hard to play defense in the modern era, because the offenses are doing so much with multiple tight ends and slots and all those things. It's one of the positions that we haven't acknowledged yet, but it's one that I'll hold the fight for. Hey, man, safeties are valuable. And these safeties that we're calling stars, we're seeing their value is increasingly higher, not only in the draft, as Caleb Downs will eventually attest to, but the way people are paying them. I mean, I think Derek Stingley's at 30 million, for Derwin James to be at 25 million. Look, we're getting closer to those worlds colliding when it comes to safeties and corners and the value that they bring to the team.
No doubt. And this is why I was so excited about this year's safety class. I'm used to seeing weak safety classes, but this year's class, Caleb Downs, Emmanuel McNeil-Warren, Dylan Dienneman, they all play slightly different than each other. And there's different elements, like EMW just has, some rare height, weight, length, physicality to him. Dienneman is a piece that you can move all over the field. Caleb Downs is an aggressive enforcer who can play big nickel. Then you look at the next level, and Tre'Davious Stukes, who some have him listed as a corner, some as a safety. I mean, Bud Clark, ball hawk, AJ Halsey does a little bit of everything for you. And then Jalen Kilgore's got some rare physical capabilities, I think. Just like it speaks to your trickle up theory, because what college football has already been doing for a while now, for 6, they've been using big nickel stuff for a while.
Forever.
All the way back in 19. Remember John Abram? What was his name from Mississippi State?
Yeah, John Abram.
From Mississippi State. He was a big nickel all the way back then for Mississippi State back in the 19 draft.
And
I'm sorry, it was the 20, was 19 draft or 20 draft. I think it was the 19 draft. Yeah, that was way back when.
Yeah, and the unfortunate thing for him, I don't know if he ever found a role that fit his game, but when you did watch him in Mississippi State, man, he would knock the taste out your mouth. He would come downhill and do all these things. And, it's funny because we talk about Jamal Adams, and whatever people think about Jamal Adams as it was with the Seahawks, I think you have to remember Greg Williams used him perfectly for the New York Jets. That year he had 6, 7, 8 sacks coming off the edge, had him at the line of scrimmage sniffing around. Pete Carroll also tried to utilize him like Troy Polamalu before the injuries just kind of took over. But yeah, you're looking for those guys that can mix it up and make it happen. And as we're looking at the college game and we're looking at the way that it changes, I mean, look here, we can say this. Sonny Styles was a safety. They didn't move the weak side linebacker. We can call him a bunch of different things, but he's a tweener and a hybrid.
So, Bucky, you're into different sports as well. That's why I love the way sports is no longer about, I'm not somebody that's real big in putting people in a box. I always like to look at other sports because I think you can pull from other sports.
Yes.
Basketball went through a shift in the 90s where they started going to more stretch fours, right? And the 3 was turning into the 4 because they were trying to mismatch defenders on the court. You had the point guard became a lead guard, and AI, they took a small AI and put him, the same thing that Steph Curry had happened, where Curry was sometimes a point and sometimes he wasn't a point. If you get bogged down with positions and silos that are very specific, you limit your ability to I think, to morph on the
Yes.
move, to counterpunch, to react and respond to what the other team is doing. Similarly, if you are a morphing type of defense or offense where you have no idea what you're going to get on any given week, that makes you much tougher to beat in any sport. So, Bill Belichick did a lot of that. My dad, who had to go
Mhm.
up against him a few times when he was an O-line coach in the league, said he would never, you never watch, you could watch tape all you wanted on New England. You were not going to get the same blitz packages that you saw at any point during the season. He came in with something brand new. And so there's different ways to be varied, but now the personnel variance, and not putting people in boxes like you said with Sonny Styles. Okay, he was a
Mhm.
safety, now he's a linebacker. I just know that he is a formidable talent because he can do multiple things. So whether you're blitzing him, whether you're covering with him, or whether he's just dropping and using that length and range to cause problems in zone, I mean, he's factoring in on more than one level, and that's what's important.
Yeah, it is really important, and people have attributed some of the things that we're seeing in basketball, like the Golden State Warriors, positionless basketball, their death lineup where they moved Draymond Green to the 5, and how they just had all wing guys. I heard Jalen Rose long time ago talk about the perfect basketball team would be 5 guys that were 6'7", 6'8", with length that could put it on the floor and shoot it, and you could switch on defense and create problems. We're seeing that, and football is becoming that with these hybrids. You can, whether you call them safeties, whether you call them linebackers, but all these dudes look the same. When I look at him, Nicky Manwari, he looks just like a linebacker. I look at Derwin James. We can say Derwin James is a puffed up. He could be a linebacker in certain regards. Kyle Hamilton is a linebacker. All these guys physically look like they're just in an amoeba defense. And because now they've even changed the numbers where now these dudes can wear single digits and low digits, and you can't tell who's a linebacker, whatever. It's almost like looking at the CFL in a way in terms of watching these guys move around. Yeah, crafty and creative defensive coordinators are finding a way to take advantage of the star position and now follow the money. When Derwin James gets broke off like that, you're going to have more people volunteering to occupy and play those roles where before that role wasn't a throwaway, but it was one that had a very small and specific job description that everyone didn't qualify for. We'll see that kind of open up. All right, Lance, it's time for Hot or Not, brought to you by Wasabi Hot Cloud Storage. And look, we can go right in your town, H-Town. Nico Collins, wide receiver for the Houston Texans, reworks his contract and gets more guaranteed money and a pay raise. The Texans are giving him a $9 million cash increase in 2026 and an $8 million raise in 2027. That'll bring up his new deal to $29.9 million in 2026, with his the 5th highest paid among receivers. You're there, man. What's the buzz like in the streets in Houston?
People happy with it. I think this is a move really where the Texans, I remember I remember back in oh man, I think it was like 2010 or 11, Andre Johnson, they had his the guy who did his contract didn't do a great contract for Andre, and
Mm-hmm.
Rick Smith and the team really didn't have to go back and redo his contract, but they did just because they wanted to do right by Andre. But that's, it's not the teams. There's not a whole lot of agents who are giving money back if their player doesn't play well. So, and
Yep.
the contract is in the player's favor. So I think this is another situation where, and Nico got a good contract, but things are changing so quickly in terms of the rate of pay. I think this is really nothing more than Nick Caserio and the Texans wanting to do right by Nico Collins because he is a good soldier for the team. He will
Mm-hmm.
play hurt when he needs to. He doesn't make a lot of noise like Andre Johnson. He just comes in, punches in, and goes to work. And then it's also, they clearly want to make sure that during these next 2 years where they feel like they have a real true window to compete for a championship, I think they want everyone on the same page, everyone focused. So if there's any concern over money, that's taken care of for Nico Collins. He's going to be happy. His agent's going to be happy, and the team is headed in the right direction. I think the money stuff is set. CJ's going to get his down the road, and everyone should be all on the same page to lock in and run for a title. So it's just a matter of tightening up tightening up the money because the contracts are skyrocketing so quickly that they want to keep a good wide receiver inside the top 5 of wide receivers paid. That's really all it is Nick just saying, hey, shout out to you, Nico. We like the way you play. We want to make sure and take care of you, show you our love and appreciation for you. I think that's all it is.
Yeah, no, look, I think there is something definitely to that. And I like being proactive. If you're the Texans, being proactive, getting ahead of this because you don't want this to be a protracted contract holdout or some kind of impasse that impacts the way that he can elevate CJ Stroud. Nick Casario and D'Amico Ryan certainly understand this is a pivotal year for CJ Stroud. And the only way you can see the best of him is you got to have all the weapons available. And we have seen he's a different player when Nico is on the field compared to when Nico is on the sideline. Now, the thing about Nico Collins is he's big, he's physical, he's really a better than anticipated number one receiver, I would say, down in Houston in terms of how he has grown and blossomed into that role. But now it's about the availability. If he can find a way to be available for all 17, because they really need that production on the outside.
Yeah.
Despite the young guys they have around them, it is clear he's the centerpiece, the focal point of that passing game. And for CJ Stroud to be at his best, man, they need big number 12 out there making it happen.
They do, and he really did. Looking back on it, just to remind everyone, he went out his junior year, but he had played mainly 2 years. He had 38 catches his sophomore year, 37 catches his junior year, did not play in 2020 at all, and then was drafted. And at that point, that was a really big deal when guys didn't play in 2020 and you were still going to take them. But his improvement has been substantial. He always had this build-up speed that made him a real threat down the field. And for his size, that's really, really important because he's a big wide receiver who can build up and win down the field. Now, what's happened over the last couple of years to CJ Stroud and to NFL quarterbacks in general is that shell coverages have taken that element away from some teams. And so on paper, you would say CJ's lost, Nico Collins has lost some of his value. But that's why you bring in David Montgomery, because you want to run the ball and say, no. We're going to break up this shell coverage. You guys can sit deep if you want. We're going to beat you up with David Montgomery, hit you in the body, hit you with body blows. When you drop your hands, we're going to try to throw a haymaker at you over the top with Nico. So I think there was a calculated effort to do that. And I think more and more NFL teams are understanding, all right, we've got to be able to run the ball against shell coverages so we can open up the field because it's hard to sustain drives for 12, 13, 14 plays for a touchdown. It's really difficult to do that. You got to have those explosives. And I think one of the reasons that the running game's coming back is because there's a desire for NFL teams to force teams out of the shell coverages so they can open up those explosives down the field. And that's something I know the Texans are trying to do, but that's something that I think all NFL teams, there's a reason we saw more running game and we see more emphasis on tight ends now is because they want to force teams, defenses out of doing what they've been comfortable doing the last couple of years. It's crazy. When you look, Bucky, fantasy football, if you look at the statistics for quarterbacks, where we were in 23 versus where we've been in 24 and 25, that's what makes Matthew Stafford's season last year so crazy because so few quarterbacks are putting up those kind of numbers right now. It's a much smaller percentage of quarterbacks hitting those crazy fantasy numbers that we saw before.
Yeah, I mean, they're not hitting it because you are seeing more teams play two eye safeties. They're taking away the deep ball. And so you have to be able to get those explosive plays in other areas, meaning, hey, we got to run the ball enough that we can create those big play opportunities off play action because the safety's nosy. Or you have to throw it underneath and hope that you have a wide receiver and a playmaker that can make it happen as a catch and run specialist, that they can do it on yards after catch and those kinds of things. That's why, to me, Nico Collins is very valuable to the Texans. He's not only a chain mover, but when you look up, man, he makes so many big plays for them. They have to figure out a way to unlock like CJ Stroud this year. And some of that is what you talked about with David Montgomery coming on board. If you get David Montgomery and the running game solid, you should see more opportunities for Nico Collins. And that is always a good thing. That was this week's Hot or Not segment brought to you by Wasabi Hot Cloud Storage. Store more and do more with your data. Try them for free at wasabi.com. Now, Lance, coming off of that conversation with Nico Collins, I want to talk about like top 5 receivers because like where we said his money fell in line, it was going to put him like 5th amongst the wideouts. And so looking at that and thinking about that, it made me think about not only like where he stacks in terms of like the landscape, but like who are the new top 5 receivers because it changes. Not groups, but just receivers based on whatever. Because Jaxon Smith-Njigba kind of took the lead by storm, but I kind of wonder, do you see him as the number one wide receiver in the league?
Man, this is, it's funny because the wide receiver position is the one that I think is the most fluid from year to year. There was a time where it was Megatron, it was Andre Johnson, Marvin Harrison for a spell, and then there was talk about was it maybe Reggie Wayne, and it's incredible. It's incredible. First of all, the wide receivers we have. Justin Jefferson was everyone's top wide receiver a couple of years ago, but then was it Jamar Chase? Now, how do you not say it's Puka Nacua with what he continues to do? But then Jaxon Smith-Njigba, good luck covering him. Like he's not guardable. So that's a really tough question. And it's crazy how year after year we have slight alterations in the rankings. It doesn't just lock in cleanly. Here's what I'm going to say. I'm going to go with, so I prefer players who are 3-level players. You can do something on the first level, on the possession stuff when you need it, maybe even a catch and run type situation because you're big and strong. Guys who can get those intermediate throws and players who have the deep ball capability. So I'm going to go Jamar. I'm still going Jamar Chase, number one. I know that Joe Burrow didn't have the same year. We had injuries and all that stuff that happened. But if I'm going to start it all up. I'm going Jamar Chase 1. Number 2, I'm taking JSN, number 2. Number 3, I'm going Justin Jefferson. Number 4, Puka Nacua. And number 5, I don't think it's Nico Collins. Number 5, who am I going with number 5? Who am I missing here? I can't say Rashid. I gotta go. I'm going CeeDee Lamb, number 5.
Ooh, okay.
And I got Amon-Ra, like you just mentioned, George Pickens. Woo, we got some receivers in this league.
Yeah, we do have some receivers in this league.
Who you got in your top 5, Buck? How are you gonna? You could run back a completely different top 5 if you wanted, and it would still be a really good top 5.
So it's gonna be a little different from yours, but I know this: if Amon-Ra St. Brown sees this clip and he sees that you left him off top 5, you definitely gonna get some smoke directed.
He's going back to me. I had him in a second. I had to put a second round grade on him too.
He's gonna come see you. He's
already gonna have smoke for me.
So my top 5, I got JSN, then I have Jamar Chase, I have Puka Nacua 3, I have Amon-Ra St. Brown 4, and then Justin Jefferson, I have 5. The reason I had JSN at the top, man, you talk about 3-level playmakers. I just think this dude is remarkable in terms of how he's continued to grow. He went from being a slot receiver 2 years ago to being an outside receiver last year in Clint Kubiak's offense. The way that he is able to run routes, the way that he can give you the big play factor. He averaged over 15 yards a catch. He had 10 touchdowns. And to do it week after week when, let's be honest, they didn't really have a credible threat on the other side where you couldn't double team him all the time, but he continued to win. So that's what impressed me about him. Jamar Chase is just a physical freak, right? Like I go in there and when you look at him, because you talk about body type and as a scout, he is built like a running back. He has like a thick, sturdy trunk. His lower body is thick and flashy, his arms and all that, and he runs through contact. Last year, Lance, this dude had 640 yards after the catch. He does a great job of making it happen in space. So he is second. Puka Nacua is third. And I'm going to say this about Puka Nacua. Like you can make the case that he's number 1 because he's a 5th round pick. He does it consistently time after time. I'm looking at these numbers and it's crazy, right? So I just talked about Jamar Chase and yards after catch being at 640. The leader, Puka Nacua, 666. This dude is not even fast. He averages like right around 12 a catch, but 129 catches. So he's always getting open, always finding a way to make it happen for Matthew Stafford. He had over 1,700 yards, 10 touchdowns. I mean, just everything. It kind of changes the way that you look, and we talk about speed. So he's third for me. Amon-Ra St. Brown is 4th because he's the best slot receiver in football. He had 11 touchdowns. He had 1,400 yards. He's averaging 12 yards a catch. And we talk about these guys being specialists, guys that are chain movers that can get open and do these things. That's him. And without Ben Johnson, because look, their offense was a hodgepodge of what they used to do and what they wanted to do. It didn't really look great. but he still find a way to be productive. And I think that's what the great ones do. And then Justin Jefferson, I know he was hamstrung by the quarterback play. The frustration is palpable. And I think we can have a later conversation about J.J. McCarthy and Kyler Murray's interview. Kyler Murray's about the team. J.J. McCarthy is very awkward when he talked about
Yeah,
the
that was
room and those things.
wild.
That
Yeah.
was not good. He's sulking and pouting already. So we already know what it's going to be. But Justin Jefferson still being able to be productive, 6 1,000-yard seasons. So look, I'm going to give him his flowers just on the consistency. There are not many who can match what he does year in, year out. And last year, I mean, really his entire career, he hasn't done it with like A-level quarterback play. So give him a credit for elevating those that are throwing the ball to him as opposed to them elevating him.
Yeah, Nico Collins is he's
Right
been
there.
talked about. He's been talked about. He's on that next level. But so is Devontae Adams is still playing at a really high level. Devontae has to, deserves a mention. I think Terry McLaurin, when he's back and healthy, obviously deserves a mention. Are we just going to forget about A.J. Brown, future Patriot A.J. Brown? He
So they say. So they say.
So they say, shout out Jalen Waddle, who I think is going to, Jalen Waddle just very quietly puts those numbers together on a very regular basis. Guys, some great wide receivers in this league. Garrett Wilson doesn't get mentioned enough, but when we start talking about the units, Bucky, if we start talking about units, it kind of changes some things up maybe a little bit. Oh, and we didn't even talk about George Pickens.
Oh no, like so here's the thing about
Pick.
here's the thing about George Pickens. Like his numbers are second most up there. I mean, he's putting up crazy production. And, like they talked in Dallas, like, oh, we got 1A and 1B. I don't know if CeeDee Lamb wants to hear that, but I think you certainly can make the case with Pickens. I think the Cowboys are doing what we all should do when it comes to Pickens. Let's wait and see about the consistency. Let's make sure he can do it again because they're going to have to stroke a big check, and it's going to be huge by waiting. But I think you still want to make sure that the guy we saw last year is going to be the guy that shows up. And I'm going to say this, knowing playmaker for years of working at NFL Network, George Pickens has mastered the art of running the slant. I want to see if they can continue to feed him on those quick slants because he was giving people problems on that under route.
Yeah. I know I'm going to get some pushback on CeeDee Lamb just because Lamb's numbers, he's missed some time. He missed 2 games in 24. He missed 3 games in 25. So maybe he doesn't deserve to be in the top 5. The touchdown numbers are not as good as they probably should be. I just know every year he just steps up. I mean, when he's healthy, he just goes to work. But Pickens really lifted a lot of those numbers off his table,
sure.
man. 9 touchdowns to 3 touchdowns, 1,400 yards to 1,077. Pickens was in the 90s catches and Lamb was in the 70s. I mean, honestly, I'm kind of countering myself here. You could really put Pickens in there ahead of Lamb, to be honest with you, just based on the numbers.
Yeah, I mean, based on the numbers, you absolutely can do it. And it's about like roles and responsibilities and how you do it. And I think defense coordinators have a tough time when it comes to the Cowboys deciding, hey, who's the one that we really have to take away? Who do we want to blot out? Because if you blot out CeeDee Lamb, you got George Pickens going crazy over the top of the defense. You take George Pickens away, then a healthy CeeDee Lamb is doing all kinds of things, catching and running, making people miss in space. They have a problem. Look, I think this Dallas offense is dynamic. It has the potential to be electric if Dak Prescott stays healthy. And if they can just find a way to run the ball consistently, like they did a little bit with Javonte Williams, yeah, they're a problem. But CeeDee Lamb, George Pickens, pick your poison. One of those guys certainly deserves to be in the top 5.
Yeah. Yeah, no doubt. And then, but from a unit, are we going to do units, Buck, or you want to stop right here?
We're just going to end it with the top 5.
Let's do that because the units. I mean, we're still dealing with a lot of the same teams: Rams, Vikings. You're dealing with the Bengals. We didn't talk about T. I mean,
but they're nice compliments. I think the bigger thing, and when we do eventually talk about the units, I think the bigger thing that is showing up now, for so long, everyone talked about having one receiver. It is almost as important when you're building your offense. You got to have 2 receivers that are high-end playmakers to be able to do it. Because if the drop-off is significant, that number 1 is never going to get off. And as you talked about with the Cowboys, Lamb and Pickens being able to be a dynamic duo. We talked about others where you talked about, look, Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jameson Williams. Both of those guys went over 1,000 yards and giving people the blues. T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, problematic. You can't deal with them up in Cincinnati. the Rams combination of not only their two wide receivers, Devontae Adams and Puka Nacua, but all the doggone tight ends that they can throw at you. You have to have a complete core to be able to succeed in this league. It's just hard to do it with a one-man show.
And it's kind of dating, going back to our previous discussion about being positionless. The line's been blurred a little bit between X's and Z's also, because George Pickens can do, he's a Z, but he's not in that same, like, he's not just the put the foot in the ground and run as fast as you can vertical. Like, it's a little different type of game. You got two X's basically in Puka Nacua and Devontae Adams, two guys who can do the same basic things. I know I watched the Texans draft Jaden Higgins, who really, frankly, plays very similarly to Nico Collins. So there are some teams who carry less about having the old basketball team mentality, as you've talked about before. I always like having the different, being able to throw different types of wide receivers out there. It's still there. We still see that. But there are a lot of teams now just saying, let's just get good wide receivers on the field. Let's not worry too much about if they fit a certain type of wide receiver. And then let's be willing to pay two wide receivers, because when you have two really good wide receivers, it just, the amount of pressure it puts on teams. But you can't pay everybody, right? Paying two wide receivers. That's why the Cowboys with Dak and Lamb, they've kind of pulled up short on George Pickens, at least for this year. So he'll be playing on that franchise tag. We'll see if they decide to pull the trigger and make all three of them payday players, quarterback, wide receivers, like the Cincinnati Bengals did with Joe, T, and Jamar Chase. Because a lot of people didn't think T. Higgins was going to get that second contract.
Yeah.
And there he is with a big contract.
Yeah, and so now they have to look at that. Is that a cautionary tale? Because they did that, then their defense went to poop. So what will the Cowboys do? Will the Cowboys be able to pay Pickens and Lamb and still have the kind of defense that they want to have, or that they need to have to be able to compete in the NFC East? There are a lot of teams that are going to have to make those struggles, because as the money continues to increase, you have to make hard decisions. And the other thing that we're eventually going to see is going to be a trickle-down effect that impacts the draft. How many teams are going to move off of that second receiver and say that, hey, with all the young guys coming in, having immediate production, like Tet McMillan, why don't we just draft one early so you have the established number one and then the young guy that is drafted high, and those are your two guys that you kind of make.
That's how I'm doing it.
Work.
If I'm building a team, that's exactly how I'm doing it, Bucky. I mean, I'm paying tackles, I'm finding guards and centers. I'm paying wide receiver one and quarterback one. I'm finding wide receiver two if I need to. You can't pay everybody. You have to make a decision on where you're going to be cheaper and where you're going to spend your money. You have to. And when you're on rookie contract, man, you can open that window wide for five, for usually by the time you got a guy, you can open that window wide for at least 3 years where you're paying guys and paying guys and paying guys. But once that quarterback comes up, bye-bye contracts, because hey, we're coming like Pac-Man. Quarterback's eating up those other salaries.
Yes, and look, it's part of a great discussion when it comes to team building, how you have to make hard decisions, and how, as a team builder, you have to not only understand who you are when it comes to your ability to select players in the draft based on your draft and development model with your coaches and your scouts, but hey, do I need ready-made guys that can come and play? Because we're not as good at developing and helping our guys go to the next level. They have to kind of come in and be what they already are, or what they're already going to be from the jump. This is fun, Lance. It's always fun, like chopping up with you, talking about all these things as it relates to the National Football League. We're going to do it again next week. Thank you guys for popping on and joining me and LZ on Move the Sticks. Until next week, we'll chat.